Okay, folks, welcome back to the final day of the first part of our WVU Comm MOOC, our West Virginia University Department of Communication Studies massive open online course. I'm your host, Dr. Nick Bowman, and I've been talking with you this week about the very basic definitions of communication technology. Our MOOC, of course, being about the role of communication technology in shaping our social lives. So, for the last couple days, I've been talking quite a bit about some of the very basic definitions of CMC, computer-mediated communication, the notion of goals and how we use technology to accomplish our communication goals. I've talked about shared spaces and some of the social influence of these goals. And then finally today, I want to talk about what I might say is the, if not the end result, the where we're going, that how all of this stuff brings us together. This notion of the power in numbers. And, you know, one of the themes I've been talking about throughout the week and online with everybody is this notion of shared space, and that communication technologies are those technologies that bring us together and allow us to, stimulate meaning in each other's minds. They allow us to share information for relationships, persuasion, entertainment. And we're living in an environment where we're not restricted by the people that are physically around us or by the time of day we communicate. So today I'm hoping to show the implications of all of the stuff leading up to today. And then hopefully this week has now set you up to have greater discussions with our other faculty about some more specific areas of computer-mediated communication. So today I'm going to tell the story of the Stolen Sidekick. It's a story that was told by Clay Shirky and the New York Times in Clay Shirky's book, We Are All Media. And it talks a lot about how we organize. It's an example of some of this stuff. I'll talk about the strength and weak ties, and it's this newer notion that in today's connected society, that it's not so much that we have to have friends with everybody, but we want to form relationships with people that we couldn't otherwise form relationships with, and some of the benefits of that. And then finally, I talk about this notion of social capital and what it means to say that we are in an information economy, or what it means to say that social connections are economically worthwhile, and why we should look at these things from several different models. So the story of the Stolen Sidekick. Some of you might be familiar with this story. It ran in the New York Times in June 2006. In fact, if you click on the New York Times logo here on the screen, you'll be taken directly to that story. What had happened is in summer 2006, a woman, Ivana, was taking a cab to throughout the city in the middle of New York, and she left her Sidekick phone in the back of the cab. The Sidekick at the time was a pretty advanced smartphone. It had the camera technology, some basic web technologies, and it was a relatively expensive phone. And so, like many people every day who take any public transportation, she left her phone behind and probably assumed it was going to be lost forever. So she went to the store, bought a new one. She was a T-Mobile customer, and she bought a new phone. And she was setting it up. Anybody who uses a smartphone knows that oftentimes they're account-based. So you type your account information in, you sync up your phone to the company's server, so in this case, T-Mobile servers, and you can download all the information you had. So if you lose your phone, you don't lose your information, your photos, your videos, things like that. It's part of the cloud computing philosophy and networking. Well, when Ivana did this, she got a little bit of a surprise. She ended up seeing all of these photos and messages and even an AOL account of a woman she didn't know. And it ends up being this little girl on the right side of the screen who apparently bought the phone from a subway platform, on the black market, paid $50 or whatever, bought the phone, took it to a hacker, got it set up, and used the phone, right? So Ivana, contacts the girl and says, hey, I would like my phone back. It's a $350 phone. She wants it back. She found the phone, and her friend Evan worked together to try to get the phone back. The little girl said no. As Ivana says it, and as Evan say it to the New York Times, the little girl basically said, "Get lost. Stop talking to him altogether." Kept using the phone. Well, normally that's it, right? In the normal operation of things, you lose your phone in a cab, and you just go buy a new one and you move on. But Ivana and Evan did something different. Evan was furious, and he put a blog up, just a very simple web page where he just typed the story about the Stolen Sidekick. Right? He wanted to tell people the story, And you know, who knows, maybe he was just ranting, maybe he just wanted to get it off of his chest, but he went to the internet to tell the story. It didn't take long for folks to take notice. You know, the web community, although it's very big, is very micro, and people follow specific trends and topics. And there's a lot of folks out there who can sympathize and empathize with a stolen cell phone. So within hours of Evan posting his blog, people jump online and they send messages of support, they try to help out. He said he had police officers giving advice on following stolen goods reports, lawyers giving advice on how to get the girl to give up the phone, people volunteering to find out who she was and where she lived. A lot of folks found her email address, they found her actual physical address, and some people would help out and give Evan information, and some people would just harass the girl. They took photos of her and from the phone and put them online with memes like "I stole a sidekick," as you see on the right hand of the screen here. And you know, at one point the girl's brother got involved and her parents got involved, and it became a very big deal. And one of the big ones I point to is Dig. Dig is a social news aggregator where people can go on and they can rank or dig stories, right? And if you dig a story, you click on it and you say, "I like to read this," it moves up the search. And so if someone logs into Dig, they can see the most popular links of the day. And Evan's story starts to crawl up things like this and get more and more traffic. And the short story is this turns into a big deal. What ended up being a girl losing her phone in a cab has now become a regional, national, and even international story if you base on the hits and where they're coming from. People from Africa and Asia were jumping in and helping out, as far as according to the New York Times article. And that's my point. Why would the New York Times cover Ivana's stolen sidekick, smartphone? Who cares? I've lost my cell phone personally at least 3 times, probably in the last year and a half. I travel extensively, and I don't have a very good mind as to where I put things. And I'm sure Sprint loves me for that. I'm sure that if Ivana went to the police, they would have taken a report and put it in a file with the other missing cell phones from that day in Central Park. Well, the reason the New York Times got involved is that this girl got arrested. At some point, this story got so big that the legacy media took attention. The New York Times thought it was interesting that this blog started so much of an uproar about a phone that was misplaced by its user, right? Long story short, the little girl is arrested. She's charged with a possession of stolen property in the 5th degree, a misdemeanor. I don't remember if Ivana got her cell phone back, but the police did take possession of the phone. And I guess you could say that Evan and Ivana got their revenge. Evan and Ivana got their revenge. Well, how was he able to do this? Social networks, the shared space. We've always looked for social networks. We've always lived in shared space. That was my discussion on our last time we met. But Evan posts a very simple personal story, and because other people occupy the same shared network as Evan does, the internet, they connect to that story. So if you were to assume Evan's in the center here, all of these other nodes, these other connections, are other people who read his story and felt for it. They attached to it. We don't know Evan, we don't know Ivana, we don't know the little girl, but we can all identify with something being stolen. And we can all identify with something being lost and misappropriated. And we know what it feels like to feel like we lost something. That story occupied our shared social spaces, and it spread through these networks. You can see how one person tells their friends here to the top of the picture, and they tell more people. Information spreads. I'll argue that, again, this could always have been the case. Evan could have gone to the bar, complained to his buddies, and they would have told their buddies. But that information probably would have stayed in the same network of people who know each other. Because unless you knew Evan, knew his bar, were part of his friends, no one else is ever going to know about that. Because, you know, it's difficult to track all that information. Because you might tell me on the street when I'm in the subway randomly about some guy's stolen cell phone. I might not even listen to you because I don't talk to people on the subway very often. Okay? But with social media, our space-time restrictions aren't there. Our social norms aren't restricting us. It's not as weird to read someone's personal blog and learn their story. It's a little weird to randomly ask people to tell their stories to you when you don't know them. So I might argue that social media has changed what I might call our connection budget. It's not that we couldn't connect before, but we have a tool to connect us better. And in a situation like this, folks who were very, very marginally connected collectively got involved towards an action point, helping Ivana get her cell phone back. So I really encourage you to read that story in the New York Times. I think it does a great job of covering it up. And again, Clay Shirky's book, We Are All Media, does an awesome job of talking about this information as well. But I want to pose something to you. Was it all worth it? Because, I'm happy that Evan and Ivana were able to get their phone back. But something I want to talk about online, when we hop on the internet, when we hop on our tweet ups, was it really the most ethical use of our shared space? At some point, this story loses one fundamental point, and that's Ivana left her phone in the cab. That was a personal human error. And Evan and Ivana were able to very successfully use the shared space as a communication tool. They got information out about the phone and about the girl who stole the phone, stole being possibly in quotations. There was certainly a persuasive element. Evan's blog was very much so, help my friend get her phone, this girl stole it. That's not really an objective look on things, right? There was a relational bit to the information. They used the blog to make connections with people they didn't know otherwise. And finally, it was entertaining to some people. And so this is a great example of just a regular net user starting a blog and using the social tools, the communication technology, to connect with the world, to share information, and to get something done. But I'm going to ask you, what if we all use the internet in the same manner? Because at one hand, for the last couple of days, I've been saying technology is goal-driven. We should all have these goals in mind. On the other hand, we may have to consider ethical usage of some of these goals. And it's something I want to think about. Can this little girl ever live this down? She bought a cell phone in a subway that was hot. Does that mean she should live with this for the rest of her life? Her image is online. You can search I Stole a Sidekick and you're going to see this little girl's photo. So it's something to think about on both sides. And I'd be really curious to hear what you guys think when we hop on the internet later on today. So part of this story brings me to a really neat concept called the strength of weak ties. And it's been something that's been around for quite a while. Evan's social network, and in this Evan's story, the Sidekick, was certainly an example of crowdsourcing. That's relying on the users to collectively help us accomplish a goal. I might crowdsource at a class. Ask my students for examples about a good football story. Wikipedia is a prime example of crowdsourcing, how 20 of us can write a better article than one of us. But we tend to think, like a lot of things, that today's stuff is new, and I'm going to tell you that it's not. In fact, you'll see this animated graphic on the right side of the screen, and it comes from a Wikipedia entry on Stanley Milgram in The Small World. And by the way, if you click on this graphic, you can read Milgram's research. He found, this is back in the 60s, that people from Wichita, Kansas, and Boston, Massachusetts are connected. People who don't know each other are connected. And it's something that I think oftentimes we forget this situation, that there are social connections in the world. We do crowdsource. What he did is gave people a letter in Wichita, and with a given set of parameters, asked them to get that letter to a man in Boston. And it was a man they didn't know. And you could read the research on the graphic for more information. But the short version of this is he found that while most of the letters didn't get there, the 64 or 70 letters that eventually arrived in Boston typically went through 6 spaces. And an example of this is this animation where you have a letter go from Wichita to Iowa, to Indiana, to Tennessee, to Virginia, to New York, and finally to Boston. That people would rely on connections with others, and those connections with others would pass the information along. And so he was able to connect this woman in Boston to these people in Kansas through six people total. How were 2 people connected? His answer was 6. One of the neat parts of the story was apparently the woman in Boston who received the letters, a good portion of them all came through her dry cleaner. And so people would somehow get the letter to a dry cleaner who knew the woman who the letters were addressed to. And something this dry cleaner supposedly handed her like 12 to 16 letters from different people in Wichita, Kansas, and beyond. What am I making a point of here? Well, crowdsourcing is not new. But think about what I just said. How hard would it be to crowdsource via chain mail? It's a cumbersome process. It's a lengthy process. As Milgram found, the vast majority of people just threw the letter in the mail, or threw it in the trash, rather. They weren't going to deal with this. That they probably did know somebody who knew 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 somebody in Boston, but they're not going to deal with it. That's changed with technology. When we have communication technology to connect us, we can realize these connections very quickly. Sort of like what Evan did with his blog. When we talk about the strength of weak ties, what we're talking about is a tie. So Mark Granovetter did a great study on this, and in fact, if you click on this link, it will take you to Granovetter's research. And I want to talk quickly about what a tie is, and then feed it back into this notion of strength of weak ties. So in those giant networks, when we say that two people, one in Wichita and one in Boston, share 6 connections, that doesn't mean they have 6 best friends. It's that they have connections with people who have people who have people. You know, it's Barbra Streisand, okay? A tie can be strong or weak, right? And it's made up of these elements on the left side of the screen. And of course, there could be an absent tie. There are people I'm just not connected to. Although, in this digital age, we might argue that the proportion of people that we are not connected to is absolutely shrinking. But a tie is made up of how much time you spend with somebody. So if I talk to my partner or my husband or my wife every day, we probably share a very strong relationship. If I talk to my students once a week, our relationship probably isn't as strong. Emotional intensity. So when we do have this tie, how important is it to us? So when I talk to my partner, my husband, my wife, there's a lot of emotion there. We share a lot of that tie itself means a great deal to my psyche and how I see the world and how I feel. Whereas a tie to my students, while I like and appreciate them, just like I like and appreciate everybody here, it's not a romantic relationship. Or it probably should not be a romantic relationship, given the power distances and things of that nature. Intimacy. This is the degree at which we share information. So my partner, my wife, or my husband, I'm going to share my deep, dark, personal secrets with, my personal thoughts and feelings and emotions, so that they can better understand me and I can better understand them. Again, with my students, they know some basic information about me, but if we're not talking about class, we probably don't talk about too much more in terms of personal information. And then finally, there's reciprocity, and this is the notion of tit for tat, that I share as much as you share. So once again, my husband, my wife, my partner, we share information all of the time. We're constantly talking, and it's matched. So she shares as much as I do, I share as much as she does, and that helps us have this strong tie. In this situation with the MOOC, with my students, I probably talk a lot more than they do. So they don't get a chance to share as much as I do. So strong or weak ties have to do with sort of the nature of our connection. So the shared space says that we all have connections. The social network says that we all have connections. Milgram finds we have lots of connections, and we're connected to people we don't even realize we're connected to. But Granovetter comes in and says, yes, that's all true, but let's talk about the importance of the actual connection. And this is where we talk about CMC. Okay? So let's think about weak and strong ties. Let's think about what makes weak ties weak, strong ties strong, which we kind of just defined, and the good and bad of each. So what Granovetter found was on the left side of the screen, that weak ties are good. If I don't know somebody very well, I tend to get new information. And the idea there is that we probably live in different worlds, in a sense. So I'm a professor of communication studies, and I might have a friend who is an economic advisor. We don't know a lot of the same information. So that if we talk casually at a faculty meeting or through email, I'm going to get new stuff from him. Okay? What Granovetter found is that when people were searching for jobs, that we tend to get job leads not from our friends, but from people who know people. And one of the reasons for that is that when you share novel information with people you don't know very well, there's not as many constraints on the information. So, my partner and I probably can't share too much information that doesn't fit our own worldviews. I'm not going to tell her something that doesn't fit her worldview because I don't want to offend her, right? There's different norms associated with that. And we'll talk about that more online. Weak ties spread information a lot faster. People like to spread novel information. You get a new bit of gossip, a new bit of advice, you post it on your social networks and you get it out there. And weak ties are great for task information, for work information, because they're not interpersonally customized. I don't have to run the risk of offending somebody or matching somebody's interest with the information because it's work information. So if I want to find out the best plumber in town, people are not afraid to tell me that because they're going to say the best plumber in town is this guy, right? It's just information from people who know plumbers. It's not meant to be, deeply social, deeply ingratiating, deeply personal information. But of course, those are the cons. With weak ties, there's no personal investment. If I put a rumor on Twitter and it's not true, I don't care very much because the people on Twitter don't know me that well. And a lot of folks see it that way, right? I can share information and the risk of sharing bad information aren't as high because I'm not going to lose any friendship because these are weak ties in the first place. Also, there's no source credibility. Again, I don't know you very well, so I really don't have a great way of saying, yeah, it's totally true. And again, you think about rumor spread. Rumors spread a lot quicker through weak ties than they do through strong ties. I'm not going to lie to my close relational partners because I'll lose credibility. And I'm invested in those relationships. Whereas with my weak ties, I'm not as invested in those relationships. And a lot of Grant Inventor's writing focuses on the weak tie argument, which is very good for these things. And of course, there are strong ties. Strong ties give us deep information. I can talk to my close friends and partner, and we can talk about stuff in great detail because we know each other. We can personalize the content. And that's really, really great for sharing social information, for example. Sharing our love and our affection and our friendship and our inside jokes and our stories. Those are all things that do really, really well in a strong tie relationship. And if anybody's tried to tell an inside joke to their weak ties, you realize it doesn't work very well. Some of the cons, of course, is information overlap. My partner and I both work in the same fields, and we know the same people, and we have the same interests. That's why we're partners. And the problem with that is we all know the same thing. So I don't tend to get a lot of unique information from her. Just like a lot of us in our work groups, we get deep information and personalized content, but oftentimes we already know the information. And of course, another one, and this is one that I'm really interested in, is that social norms can stifle sharing. With our close, strong tie relationships, there are norms of behavior. You behave a certain way. And I think of people going home and talking to their parents. And it almost seems like no matter how old you are, when you're at your parents' house, your child, they're the parents. And there's just certain things you don't talk about. Maybe you don't swear as much. Maybe you dress a certain way. For me, I always wash my car before I pull up in my father's driveway because he's real big on the car being clean. So no matter how filthy my SUV is, when I come out of West Virginia and go back to Missouri, I wash that car. And what I mean by stifling sharing is social norms tend to push us towards a certain norm, a certain way of behaving that can override our own goals. I don't want to offend my parents. I'm not going to tell them about a trip I made to Las Vegas. It's sort of like the idea of shared space in the traffic signal. When we have all these signs and symbols and traffic lights and traffic signs, we use the regulations to dictate our behaviors. Well, in a strong tie relationship, it's almost like the rules and regulations of the relationship sometimes dictate the communication behavior in the relationship. So as we occupy social space, which ties are better to have? I want to talk to you guys about this because with many of our discussions, we have to look at the goals of each and the goals of each communicator and how they match up with our own. I sound kind of a wishy-washy and a bit milquetoast, but I'm going to say that we need both. Of course we need both. The strong and weak ties overlap each other. And I think what Grant Inventor was trying to point out is a lot of times we tend to ignore weak ties. It's the folks who ignore the department secretary or don't talk to folks who aren't their friends. And he would say you're missing out on a lot of information. And the shared social space of the network, the thing that communication technology puts us in touch with, is a gold mine for forming weak ties. In fact, that brings us to our final point of my week of the MOOC, and that's social capital. It's the recognition that there is economic value in our social networks, that it's not just a matter of having friends and hanging out and drinking a beer and having a cup of coffee and a smoke. It's we have real, tangible value in the people that we know. We live in an information economy where, think about, weak ties get us new information. If you work in accounting, if you work in a business field, unique information is what sells product. Right? If you're a head of a household, unique information keeps your kids safe. Right? If you're trading stocks, so long as it's not inside information, being able to analyze big data and analyze different trends and investments in a particular way puts you ahead of the game. That information is now money. The Target example, when we talked about how Target targeted the 17-year-old girl who was pregnant, well, yeah, because when she really does turn out to be pregnant, they're going to sell more diapers. They're going to make more money off of this. You know, Google search trends are based off this notion of information economy. It's all about social capital. It's that our social networks, because they put us in touch with each other, they give us access to more information and more resources than ever before, capital being a resource. You know, whether it's fuel, or in West Virginia, coal, right? That's an economic, that's a good, that's a capital good. Now information is a capital good. Information economy is useful information. It's that we could talk about the shared space giving us unique information. Those weak ties give us novel information that we can use in our professional and personal lives. It's the useful connections. The information economy, the shared social space, puts us in touch with each other to continue to get that information, not to mention the psychological benefits of being connected. And its useful distribution. We no longer have to know everything about everything. We just have to network well enough to where we can get information from our network. And as long as you contribute as much information as you pull from the network, you are valuable. Right? We can actually distribute our minds across the network, and we don't have to be an expert on everything anymore. But we have to have ways to get in touch with the folks who are experts. We really are in an age of creation and collaboration, that Web 2.0 concept. So let's increase our social capital. And how do we do that? You increase your social capital by increasing your role in the shared space. And that's really been a point of my discussions this week. And to kind of take it all home, you do that by harnessing the connective power of your communication technology tools. And this is why the study of CMC will define our futures. It truly will begin to shape our social lives. And so the social importance of this MOOC, this how communication has shaped our social lives, maybe that's apparent now, right? It's really important for us to step back and analyze these issues so perhaps we can apply them better to our new shared spaces. Embrace the machine. Okay, we have new robot overlords. We have these technology devices that are consuming our behaviors and shaping our behaviors. And man, go for it. Welcome your new robot overlord. But because it's your tool, not your overlord, we have robot assistants. You should read up on Asimov's laws of robotics. He talks about a robot has to follow human commands and it cannot harm another human. We're not being hurt by the technology, but it is a tool, and it is incumbent on each and every one of you as users, as members of my shared social space, to use your communication technology to satisfy your goals. And as we all do this, and as we all realize our role in the network, we can much better understand relationships, cyberbullying, information economies, information overload, and all of these other things. So we're going to have one more chat. Again, I'm going to be online today. Share your answers, bring your questions and commentary. You can hit me at Bowman Spartan and all the information from the rest of the week. And then finally, I want to do one more chat with you guys. So on Saturday, February 10th, 2013, I'm going to host a final tweet up. It's going to be from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'm going to try to address any final concluding comments or questions you might have about the basics of CMC. And what I hope is now that you've taken my course, you can go into the rest of our MOOC and really get an understanding for some very specific and very pertinent issues. Go Mountaineers, and I will see you online.